Please welcome to the stage two-time record holder and all-around cool guy, Colin O'Brady.
Word for word, how I asked for it. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for being here. It's fantastic to be here today. I'm going to take you guys on a bit of a journey. So last year, I set 2 world records, something called the Explorers Grand Slam, so to climb the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents, to go to the North and South Pole. This is from Carstensz Pyramid, which is the tallest mountain in the Australasia continent. We'll get into that, obviously. Going over a tiny little piece of rope with 2,000 feet drop-offs on either side is enough to get the heart pounding right away. But before we get into all of that, I want to take you guys back a little bit, because about 10, 11 years ago, my life looked nothing like any of this. Just after graduating from college in 2006, I took a backpack and a surfboard and decided to head off in the world for an adventure with no itinerary, and found myself on a beach in rural Thailand. And of course, because I was 22 years old and invincible, this looked like a great activity to partake in. Yes, that's a flaming jump rope. And as you can probably tell, it did not go very well for me. So the rope wrapped around my legs, lit my body completely on fire to my neck. The ocean was a few steps away, so kind of with one last breath, an ounce of courage, I ran to the ocean, dove into the ocean to extinguish the flames, but not before this happened, which is I had been severely, severely burned. I won't make you stare at that for too long. But what must have been at least, 24 hours or so later, I awoke leaving a small ICU, and there was placed in a surgery room in ICU, where there was a cat running around my bed and across my chest, which was certainly hammering home the fact that I was very, very, very far from home and in a dire set of circumstances. Certainly this unsanitary hospital could kill me, and I don't know what even worse, they were giving me a ton of morphine at the time, but I don't know if anyone have morphine in the hospital? Maybe, yeah. It's not that fun, right? It kind of feels like there's insects crawling over your skin, and it's horrible. So just a terribly traumatic experience for me, and I was really downward spiraling quick, and I was in the middle of nowhere on a small island in Thailand, and they couldn't move me because it was really too intense for that. So luckily for me, about 5 days in this ordeal, I ended up having 8 surgeries, 8 days in a row in this small hospital. My mom arrived to my bedside to be my protector, and so I know now that she was crying every single day in the hallways and pleading with the doctors, but she instead every day came into my hospital room with a smile on her face, an air of positivity, daring me to dream about the future, saying things to me like, "Colin, what do you want to do when you get out of here? Like, let's set a goal." And, me being 22 years old at the time, I was like, "Are you kidding me, Mom? I'm screwed. My life is over." The doctors every day were telling me that I would never walk again normally because my legs had been so badly burned over the ligaments, the knee, and ankle joints, where the mobility was really never supposed to return. And so it was a dire set of circumstances for me. But she really kept at me every single day, forcing me to think about the future. So finally, kind of buying into her positivity, I said, "All right, Mom, one day when I get out of here, I'm going to one day race a triathlon." So that was my big goal. And looking down at my legs at the time seemed rather unrealistic. I'd also never done that before. I'd never done a triathlon. But in my mind, that's what a strong, sort of able-bodied person could do. And so before I knew it, I actually asked her to actually next to this doctor, he kind of has a crazy coy look on his face, because I said, "All right, I'm training for a triathlon now. Here I am, I'm burned, I'm in Thailand." And I had him bring in some weights for me to start kind of working my arms out just to get something going on for me. But really that goal gave me a purpose. And so it was several more weeks until I was released from that Thai hospital and flown back to Portland, Oregon, which is my hometown. And I still hadn't even taken a single step at that point. So I was carried on and off the plane and placed in a wheelchair when I got home. And the next morning, I awoke in my mother's kitchen, and my mom said to me, she says, "All right, Colin, well, now I know you've got this big triathlon goal. That's great. But today your goal is to take one single step." And so she grabbed this chair and placed it one step in front of my wheelchair. She said, "You need to figure out how to get out of your wheelchair and get into that chair in front of you." It took me 3 hours that day to work up the courage and strength to do that. But somehow, some way, I got out of my wheelchair and sat into that chair. And the next day, she moved the chair 5 steps away from me, and the next day 10. each day I could take a few more steps. Ever present in my mind was this triathlon goal of getting back to my fitness. And a little shot of me, I was a swimmer as a kid, and I was a collegiate swimmer at Yale before all this burn accident happened. So I was just kind of figuring, how can I get back to being able to move my body? I remember the day after I could walk a little bit, months into this, and then one day I could jog. Jogging felt like flying that day, but it certainly was a far cry from being able to run any sort of triathlon. So it took another 18 months until I had a shot at actually taking a shot at my goal. But in about a year and a half after my accident, I had taken a job in Chicago in the financial industry, and I signed up for the Chicago Triathlon. So about a year and a half, like I said, after my burn accident, I honored my goal by diving into Lake Michigan and swimming a mile for the start of the triathlon, and then getting on my bike, riding it 25 miles, and then putting my running shoes on and running to the finish line. Crossing that finish line for me was a very joyous moment, having honored that goal that I set in the Thai hospital to not only walk again, thank you, and then there was one other crazy surprise in store for me that day. I hadn't just finished the race, but I actually had won the entire Chicago Triathlon, beating out about over 4,000 other participants on the day. Certainly was a crazy moment for me. And although the win was certainly a nice cherry on top, the first thing I thought about were those moments in the Thai hospital, and wondering what would have happened had my mom not forced me to set a measurable goal and to keep moving forwards. And I had learned this, to me, a really invaluable lesson that I've taken with me through the next decade of my life, which was that life is going to test us with setbacks, no matter who we are. But we have every opportunity to choose to keep moving forwards one step at a time. I'd also learned that we all as humans, not just me, but everyone, has reservoirs of untapped potential inside of us and can achieve great things. But quite often, the biggest thing standing in our way is our own minds. And so this opened up a whole new sort of pathway for me in my life, which allowed me to go quit my finance job the next day and become a professional triathlete, which is far less lucrative than the financial industry, but it allowed me the opportunity to race in 25 countries on 6 different continents over the next 6 years, which was an amazing period of life for me. And I'd always kind of dreamed of being a professional athlete. So not as glamorous as the NBA or something like that, but amazing experience nonetheless that I really cherished. And then in the fall of 2014, so I guess almost 3 years ago now, I found myself here, which was at the summit of Ecuador's 3rd tallest mountain, with a diamond ring in my pocket, asking my longtime girlfriend, Jenna, to marry me. And I joke with her, I don't know if it was the altitude in her brain at the time, but luckily she did say yes. And we got engaged on top of this mountaintop. And it was around the same time that racing and triathlon was going well for us, for me. But we are embarking on a new piece of life together, and we really wanted to set some new goals together. And we both love this Emerson quote, which goes, "Unless you try to do something beyond what you've already mastered, you will never grow." So I'm sure a bunch of Googlers in this room, you're very familiar with the growth mindset or thinking about innovation and creative ideas. So I'm a big believer in that as well. And so in this phase of time, we said, what's a big goal that we want to set? What do we really care about? What's meaningful to us? So I, being an athlete, still was really committed to pushing my body, but wanted to build something that had a larger arc to it that could have a great impact in the community. So we decided that I would attempt to set the world record for something called the Explorers Grand Slam, with the larger purpose of founding a nonprofit to inspire kids everywhere to move their bodies, to dream big, to set goals, to live active and healthy lives. So I mentioned it when I first started this, but I'll review quickly what the Explorers Grand Slam entails. But that entails climbing the 7 summits, so that's the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents, as well as completing expeditions to both the North and South Pole. Fewer than 50 people in history have ever completed the Grand Slam. Most people take 5 or 10 years, train for a big expedition like Everest or Denali, then come home, plan and train for the next run. I was going to attempt to break the world record, so be the fastest to consecutively do all of that. So from start to finish, no breaks, no rest in between, climb one mountain, come back, climb one mountain, fly to the next place, climb the next one. So that was our bigger purpose. And like I said, we found a nonprofit. So our nonprofit is by the name of Beyond 7-2, so for the 7 peaks and 2 mountains, but that this whole idea was beyond me and this, but using sort of the media and story around this to tell stories and get really in the curriculum of classrooms. So, today's kids are the least active in history. I was fortunate to grow up around parents. My dad's an organic farmer, and my mother works in the natural foods grocery industry, so I had some great influences in terms of health and wellness in my life, but I'm sure everyone in this room is aware that's not true of a large amount of our population. So really trying to spread that positive message around wellness and how wellness can contribute to positive growth in any aspects of life, not just being an athlete, but in terms of academic pursuits, career, anything like that in the long run. So we really brought our message all around to schools, and it started as a small thing, but as you'll see, it grows and grows throughout the course of this journey. But similar to many of you who are, of course, thinking of great, exciting ideas here at Google, which are probably well beyond my capacity to even dream up. We had this big dream, but we didn't have any funding to do the project. We didn't know anything about PR. We didn't know anything about branding, marketing. We didn't know anything about founding a nonprofit. So this really started as just that, simply an idea. And so for the next 18 months before I even started out on any of the mountains, I remember the moment when we Googled, what is the difference between PR and marketing? It's a very rudimentary question, but we actually didn't know the difference. Again, as we'll see, that this does grow, and we learned along the way. After a year and a half, we finally did raise this necessary sponsorship. We founded a nonprofit, kind of turned this dream into reality, trying to figure out all the different nuances of all the many places we need to go to. And Jenna was a huge part of all this. So really a team effort, not just me doing this at all, but this was her full-time thing as well. So the first place that I left for was Antarctica, and Jenna was ever steady at the helm of running our nonprofit and expedition logistics in the background. So this is the first step on the journey. I remember this small plane landed me down on the frozen continent, and as you can see from this photo, the landscape out there is crazy, just desolate and surreal, just white in every single direction. I describe it best as it feels like standing inside the belly of a ping pong ball, just really disorienting and white everywhere you look. And, of course, I had read about this, but the extreme cold was something that I had never been privy to. So it was so cold that the average temperature in Antarctica is minus 40 degrees. And what this picture is, I've actually taken a cup of boiling water from my dinner and thrown it into the air, and it instantly turns into ice. So that gives you a sense of what minus 40 degrees feels like on your body. And you saw from the last photo, I actually have all my gear behind me, and I'm dragging it in a sled day by day till I reach the South Pole. On many of these journeys, I was completely alone, but on this journey, I had a team with me, a few other people. And so this is us inside of our tiny little only shelter of a tent, kind of keep warm and put a smile on our face. And this next video shows kind of the importance of teamwork in such a hard and harsh environment, which is when you get out of your tent in the morning, it's minus 40. There's no standing around. Of course, there's a time lapse, but over the course of about 5 minutes, we're packing everything up. Everyone has a role, putting it in our sleds, and then quickly moving along. Because if you stand around even for a minute or two in minus 40 degrees, you can immediately get hypothermic or get frostbite. So having a really well-oiled machine of a team working, and that's a theme throughout this entire project. Even in moments when I was alone, there was a team in the background, Jenna, et cetera, working to make sure this all somehow would hopefully get work. So I arrived on middle of January 2016 to the South Pole. And when you arrive to the first pole or mountain, that's actually when the official clock is starting. So I'm now on the clock for the world record going from here. And so I'm going to run through a few of the mountains. Of course, not enough time to tell you stories about all of them, although every single expedition itself has many stories. But I'll tell you some longer stories about Everest and stuff after that. But next up was Mount Vinson, which is the tallest mountain in Antarctica. This was me taking my mask off for literally 10 seconds to get a photo to prove that I was there. I'm trying to smile, but it's actually minus 70 degrees wind chill on the summit of that peak. And you can see my eyebrows and eyelashes immediately are iced up as I try to take just one quick photo to prove I was there. Next up was Aconcagua, the tallest mountain in South America. So Forgive me if this is review for some of you. It's a very smart room. But on mountains, of course, as you get to higher altitudes, the oxygen remains the same, but the pressure being less dense, you can breathe in less air as you get up there, which means your body needs to get used to the thinner air to climb up. If we got dropped off at the top of Mount Everest, for example, we would, right now from sea level, we would die in about 2 to 3 minutes because we would not be able to breathe up there. So that process of getting your body used to the higher altitudes is called acclimatization. But still at these high altitudes, so Aconcagua is the tallest mountain outside of the Himalayas in the entire world, or outside of Asia, I should say, 22,874 feet. So at the top of there, I actually was on this expedition completely alone. A random guy who I met climbing down took this photo of me. But as I'm up there, I'm literally walking, at the pace of like, 1 step every 15 seconds. And even that up there is like, you're cruising, like you're Usain Bolt up there when you're like moving like this, like it's pretty crazy what it feels like to be up at that high altitude. But the one benefit of climbing these mountains as quickly as I was that I could be acclimatized from one mountain. Of course, I was getting more and more tired fatigue-wise, but I'd be more acclimatized going into the next mountain. So it allowed me to climb some of these mountains a little bit quicker, which brings us to Kilimanjaro. Anybody in here climbed Kilimanjaro? A couple people? All right. What route did you climb?
I did the motion.
Nice, very cool. So as the couple of you have climbed this mountain in this room know, Kilimanjaro is generally climbed in about a week. It's 19,341 feet, and that's very high, again, if you're coming from sea level. But I had just come from Aconcagua. And I had actually, Kilimanjaro was the one mountain that I had previously climbed in the years past. So in 2013, Jen and I climbed Kilimanjaro together. And we climbed the Macheme route, normal, in about 6 days, I believe. But I decided, since I was on the clock, I wanted to see if I could climb Kilimanjaro faster than that. And so I actually set myself the goal to see if I could climb Kilimanjaro in a single day, one single push from the base to the summit. And so Kilimanjaro has some interesting rules because it's inside of a national park inside of Tanzania. And so you're required, even though I didn't really need a guide per se, you're required to go with a local guide, which is actually a really great way of creating jobs over there and everything like that. So we kind of went back and forth dialogue, and they said, yeah, well, we've got a guy for you. And I was like, well, make sure he understands that I want to try to climb this mountain in one day. Enter Frank. Great guy. I'm put with Frank. I said, Frank, how many times have you climbed Kilimanjaro? He says, I've climbed Kilimanjaro 115 times. Like, you're in good hands. Like, you look at him, he's a really strong guy, super friendly, amazing guy. We're having a blast together. And I said, we're going to try to climb it in one day. What's the fastest you've ever climbed it in? And he said, out of the 115 times, the fastest I've climbed it in is 3 days, but I've always wanted to see if I could climb it in one day. So we set off, and we're going super, super hard, and the bottom part is the jungle, so it gets cold up high, but you start at 5,000 feet, so there's a significant change of altitude as well as temperature, climate, everything changes. It's kind of a jungle to start with monkeys and everything down at the bottom. And he takes off. And before the first hour, 2 hours, I'm so exhausted. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm an idiot. Like, I obviously bit off more than I can chew here. I thought I was super strong, but this guy is like way stronger than me. I'm trying to keep up, but I'm like sweating profusely. And I'm finally thinking to myself, like, I'm gonna have to tell him, like, I don't know, like, I'm not sure. So we take a break. We drink some water, eat a little bit of food, and then I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna say anything yet. We're gonna power on for another hour. Another hour goes by, and again, I'm like really kind of like on my last little up. I'm like, wow, this guy's so strong. Like, I really overestimated my abilities. We get to the next break, and he says, oh, hey, can I borrow some of your water? And I was like, all right. We're like 3 hours in what I think is gonna be about a 12 or 15-hour day at the shortest. And I was like, are you out of water? He's like, yeah, I drank all of mine, so I gotta tell you something. I'm like, what's that? He goes, so there's a bet back at the hotel that there's a 0% chance you're gonna be able to climb Kilimanjaro in a single day. And they all paid me to try to tire you out as hard as I could in the first few hours. I actually didn't bring enough food or water. He's like, but you seem pretty determined. Like, I keep expecting you to say we're gonna stop, and you're like still chugging along. And I was like, oh, God. Made me feel a little bit better. But then I was like, wait, no water, no food. Luckily, I had thrown a couple of extra energy gels and bars in my backpack and had a little bit of water. So the cat was out of the bag, but unfortunately for him and his bedding buddies, we did continue onward to the summit and made it to the summit in 11 hours from the summit, from the base of the summit, arriving at the night, as you can see here. So that was a funny chapter, but Frank is an amazing guy. We still stay in touch. So after that, I went off to Carstensz Pyramid, which is the tallest mountain in Australasia. So there's sort of somewhat of a controversy whether Australia, the continent itself, or the sort of larger region, depending where the tectonic plates were, was the tallest. So I actually climbed 8 instead of 7 summits, just because there's 2 different lists. So I climbed the tallest in the Australian continent, which is called Kosciuszko, as well as this mountain, which is the tallest in the larger region. And as you can see from that first video, this was, I think I'm trying to smile here, but I'm very scared. No, let's be honest. And then next up was Mount Elbrus, the tallest mountain in all of Europe, which is in Russia. That was a winter ascent, almost always climbed in summer, but I climbed it in winter so that I could stay ahead of the curve for the record. The next place that I went to was the North Pole. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, as it's not something that everyone is aware of. Of course, when you think about it, it's obvious. But the North Pole, of course, there's no land underneath the North Pole. It's just the Arctic sea ice floating around in the middle of the ocean up there. And so you're literally walking around on ice. Right below it is the ocean. There's these cracks in the sea ice, and it's getting worse and worse, unfortunately, because of climate change, of course. So much so that I was crossing the last degree of latitude, and I had to arrange for this Russian helicopter to drop me off at my starting point for me to cross to the North Pole and then come pick me up. And for an extra 8 or 9 days, they couldn't find anywhere to land because they kept seeing this cracked sea ice. And my partner, who I was out there with, a guy by the name of Eric Larson, he actually fell through the ice at one point when we were there and had to pull him out and keep moving forward. So it's a really crazy environment, and again, it's about minus 40 degrees. And why that's actually particularly challenging is that this brings us to the final third. So the last three mountains or expeditions were the North Pole, Everest, and Denali, which in a lot of ways are the 3 most challenging expeditions. And then the North Pole is at sea level. And so me being delayed at the North Pole at sea level right before Everest did the reverse of what I was talking about before, being acclimatized, and all of a sudden I was back acclimatized to sea level, having been delayed, and I needed to climb next Mount Everest, of course, the tallest mountain in the world, coming from sea level. And because of that delay and the way that the weather windows overlap, I was actually the very last person to arrive to Mount Everest Base Camp on the entire season. So I arrived at the end of April. People normally arrive to Everest Base Camp, which is at 17,000 feet, around the first week of April. And it's not like you can say, oh great, I showed up a month late, I'll just summit a month later. There's a very specific weather window on Everest. It's usually the 2nd or 3rd week of May that it's even possible to summit the mountains, when the jet stream diverts from the peak and you get this tiny little moment of lighter I should say, winds, not light winds, lighter winds, to try to get to the top of the world. So I was really up against it now. I'd been going 100+ days, hadn't taken a rest, I was exhausted, and I had now only 3 weeks to climb Mount Everest rather than the customary 8 weeks that it normally takes. But this is what the mountain looks like. That's me standing up around Camp 1. So basically there's base camp and then 4 progressive camps above that, aptly named Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4. Very exciting names. And then from Camp 4, you go to the summit. Again, the reason these camps is each camp you get your body a little bit used to a little bit more thin air. Some of you might know a little bit about Everest or read about it, but this is the famous Khumbu Icefall in 2014. Unfortunately, about 15 or 16 Sherpas, I believe, died right here in this spot due to an avalanche, and that closed the entire climbing season, so no one summited Everest that year at all. And then in 2015, of course, there was the huge earthquake in the country of Nepal that devastated the country as well as closed the climbing season. So in 2016, when I was there, no one had summited Everest from Nepal in a couple of years. And you can imagine, as I was going out and trying to get people to support this project, people would say to me, so wait, no one's climbed Everest in 2014 or 2015. You think you're going to try to climb Everest this year and all these other mountains? Like, good luck. So it was very hard for me to get support for this project initially because of the challenges that Everest had had. And this is what it looks like crossing one of these. This is me with my GoPro facing down. So there's not just one or two of these ladders like this spanning crevasses, but that's about a 300 or 400 foot drop off into an icy grave down there. And there's about 50 or 60 of these ladder crossings throughout the Khumbu Icefall, depending on how it's all moving around. So strangely, you try to get sort of used to this feeling of crossing across this precipice, but as you'll see, I cheered every time because I was just excited to make it across. Not above, hooting and hollering every time I made it across one of those. And so next up, the challenge is something called the Lhotse Face. There's about a 5,000 foot, very steep section of the mountain. So I was climbing without any guides, just myself and a guy by the name of Pasang Bodhi, who was a Sherpa who I'd met climbing in Nepal the year previously. And we realized that it looked like there was going to be a weather window. So we thought, there's a very small weather window, but let's see if we can skip from Camp 2 to Camp 4 directly and then go up to Camp 4 and from there to the summit. And so this is us arriving to Camp 4, which is supposed to be our summit day the next evening. You climb through the night to reach the summit. And as you can see here, I'm starting to wear supplemental oxygen at this point. So I did use supplemental oxygen for my summit push, which about 98% of people who summit Everest do. And of course, with my condensed time period, there would definitely no opportunity for me to try to climb without supplementary oxygen. So this is called the Geneva Spur, and it looks like it's a really beautiful day as the weather window had predicted, but in an instant the weather shifted and about 50, 60 mile per hour winds blew in on us right after we took this photo, and it took us, so there's no photos of this because it was such a bad storm, it took us 2.5 hours just to set up our tent and get inside and try to survive the night at 26,000 feet, which 26,000 feet and above is actually called the death zone, and it's aptly named because the human body cannot survive for very long above 26,000 feet. And so we got in our tent just to survive the night, knowing fair well that we had no shot for the summit. And this video I'm going to show you is us the next morning getting ready to go down from the mountain.
I have to descend now because I'm stuck in this windstorm. Painful because it's clear skies. The summit feels like it's just right there, but we're just getting blown around way too much here. Way too dangerous to risk going on the top right now. Well, just come down from Camp 4. Have to have a turn around due to weather. A lot of people, if they go to 4 and they come down, there's no going back for sure. That's it for them. That's a one-way ticket. Yeah, not for me. Whew, disappointing. Really, really disappointing. It appears I still have Everest, so I'm going up there soon. Yeah.
So, trying to give myself a pep talk, as you can see. I don't know how convinced you are by that. I'm not sure I am either. And what I don't realize actually when I'm taking this video, but I realize quickly as I get back to my tent, is that what you see on my cheek there is the beginning of frostbite on my cheek from being in that windstorm. And so I'm actually in even worse circumstance than I realize at this point. And it's very rare that people make more than one attempt for the summit on Everest after weathering a night at Camp 4. Generally, that's enough to kind of, obviously fatigue-wise, but also because I showed you I was starting to use supplemental oxygen. So you're using some of your supplies, which I've cached high on the mountain, and so it gets harder and harder to go up there. But luckily, a few days later, another weather window presented itself, and because of some people that we knew having to abort their climbs due to their own sickness, there was some extra oxygen bottles cached on the mountains, and so I had to get a little bit lucky, but it gave me the opportunity to at least give it another shot, and I felt like, I'd put so much into this. I didn't know, again, if I was going to be able to make it, but I owed it to myself to give it my absolute best shot to go back up there. So again, climb back up to Camp 4. This is Camp 4 right around 10 o'clock, and those are actually other people's headlamps going up towards the summit. And honestly, the weather window looked exactly the same on the Doppler and everything as the last one. It looked like it could be good, but I had also just seen how fast the weather had shifted. And so I was in my tent at this point, terrified. And really doing the only thing that I could think to do to calm myself down is I reached for my satellite phone and I called Jenna and I said, Jenna, really, what do you think I should do? I saw how fast this can change. I'm afraid people might die up here tonight. At the very least, there's going to be significant frostbite that occurs on the mountain tonight because of the extreme cold and winds that were predicted. And in an incredible moment of bravery, she really set aside her own justifiable fears and said to me what I needed to hear in that moment. She said to me something along the lines of, Colin, people are going to summit Mount Everest tonight, and there is no reason that you can't be one of them. Go inside your body and listen. Face your fears. I know you can do it. And that really gave me the courage and strength to get outside of my tent and give it a shot. As you can see, on Everest, there's one rope that goes up Everest that all the teams together have pooled together to help put on the mountain, which allows people to be clipped in and connected to the mountain with relative safety. But the problem with that is that it also can create some traffic jams, which if you've read about Everest, you've probably heard about that. So as I said, no one had climbed Everest in 2014, no one had climbed Everest in 2015, and somehow I end up on a summit day, the most crowded day the mountain has seen in over 3 years. There's about 100 people going for the summit because of these weather windows that had all condensed people onto this one day, this one time. It was certainly my last shot. And so Pasang Bodhi and I decided to get out of our tent and go for it, but we actually decide that the safest option is to not be clipped to the rope at all, but instead to walk beside of these people. So if we fell, we would be in a dire set of circumstances, but actually walking behind in this slow line of people. I demonstrated before how slow I was walking on Aconcagua. Everest is a whole other thing. 1 step per minute is not uncommon on the summit day, even with supplementary oxygen. And so to keep ourselves warm, we felt like we needed to keep moving. And so we get up to the top about where those headlamps end. We've been unclipped this whole time. We safely climb up there without any ropes. And finally, we get to a section where people are still in front of us, but it's too unsafe to be unclipped. And so I take out my last jacket. I actually have one more bigger layer to put on me. I'm adjusting my gloves a little bit, and I look down, and my right hand is completely black. Just black as black can be, which is a very telltale sign of severe frostbite. And I'm at about 28,000 feet in altitude at this point, much higher than I've ever been. Brain's not working pretty well. It's still a little bit dark outside. And I decide, I have this very strange thought process, which is I'm not particularly proud of, I suppose, but I look at my hand, I'm like, well, I guess my right hand is gone. Is Jenna still gonna love me? And then I thought, well, maybe she'll love me, even though I'm gonna lose my hand anyways, if I at least get to the summit of Everest and then lose my right hand. And so I decide to continue onwards towards the summit, and I don't tell Pasang Bodhi because he's a great climbing partner. And if he had told me his hand was like this, I would have turned him around immediately, and he would have certainly done the same for me, being a very smart and savvy climbing partner. And so we end up, again, these are the kind of lines that we ended up in. We're moving slowly, and the daylight finally rises. And I decide, well, I should probably capture this a little bit, trying to capture this footage and things for all the people following along, particularly the kids. They're using this inside of the school curriculums and interacting with us over social media this entire time. And so I get out my GoPro to shoot this video, which gives you a sense of what it looks like high up on the summit ridge of Everest. It's about 30 minutes away from the summit. That's Pasang Bodhi there in red and a few other climbers in front of us near a section called the Hillary Step, which is maybe not there anymore. And as you can see, it's an incredible place. Despite the situation with my hand, I was just inspired by the view and everything I could see. And because I'm messing around with my camera and I've got these big, huge mitten and gloves on, I should say first, the one other thing that I had done is I have heated foot warmers inside of my boots. And so when I saw my hand like this, I turned my heated foot warmers up as high as possible. So I'm thinking, I didn't notice my hand being this cold. Who knows what my feet look like? But I just cranked those up as high as possible to at least be like, well, they're at least warm. And as I do this with my camera, I adjust my gloves around again, and I look down at my hand, and all of a sudden I'm like, my hand's back! My hand's back! And Pasang Bodhi looks back at me from that ridge. He's like, Colin, premature celebration, like the summit, it's still just there. And I was like, no, man, my hand's back. He's like, what are you talking about? Because I hadn't told him, of course. And it just so happened that I had chemical hand warmers in my gloves, and they had broken open. And the charcoal and copper from the chemical hand warmers had dyed my hand black. But my hand was completely fine. And so thank God I didn't find that out back down at Camp 4, having descended off the mountain in the middle of the night, but instead I found it a few steps away from the summit. And so my celebration was slightly premature, but about 30 minutes later, we ended up at this moment, which is an unforgettable moment for me.
I'm on the summit of Mount Everest, top of the world. No words can describe what these two guys right here. Now, I say, buddy, yes, top of the world. Top of the world!
So, full of elation in that moment. And I had mentioned the social media before, and I as you know, I set 2 world records ultimately, but there's another record that I don't get enough credit for. I think Guinness should add this one, but I was actually also the very first person to Snapchat from the summit of Mount Everest. So there that is. And that was pretty fun, but all jokes aside, that actually, ultimately was the most viewed Snapchat story of all of 2016, and because of the work we were doing with kids, we were able to see, the sort of a look into it in real time, which was a really fun way. One of the many ways we were sharing this story, but actually using technology on the summit of Mount Everest to give people an eye into it in real time was super fun for us, particularly with the age demographic that uses Snapchat. So anyways, we make it to the summit. And that was just a incredible moment for me, and a childhood dream, really, a mountain I'd always dreamed about climbing. So safely descending back down the mountain, back to Camp 4, I crawled back into my tent at Camp 4, and I reached for my satellite phone to call Jenna again to tell her the news. And she was like, how are you doing? Did you make it? And I was like, yes, I made it. No frostbite, no injuries. Like, I'm exhausted, but I'm good. And then I said, well, actually, I actually burned my feet. And she said, what? Oh, we've actually been getting some reports, so she'd been following on social media, that there's a lot of frostbite. And actually about 25 people over the next 3 days were evacuated off the mountain with extreme frostbite. And 2 people, not whom I knew or were climbing with, did pass away that night on the mountain. So unfortunately, my premonition had been correct, really putting into perspective how intense it can be up there, and the risks you're taking. But she said to me, wait, I thought you said no frostbite. I said, yeah, no. I actually burned my feet. So I had turned my boot warmers up so warm that I had actually burned 2 little small circles in the bottoms of my feet. And she was like, you are an idiot. Your feet, fire, like, you're the only idiot that goes and climbs Mount Everest, doesn't get frostbite, but actually burns your feet. Like, she then said something that I will never, ever in my life forget. She says, so Colin, I actually, despite the burnt feet and everything, I need you to put your boots back on. I was like, what? It just took me an hour to take my boots off, crawl my tent, I summited it. What are you talking about? She goes, well, we've been doing some calculations back home, and it just so happens that if you can summit Denali in the next week, you have a chance to set not 1, but 2 world records. I was like, all right. She goes, so I need you to put your boots back on, climb all the way back down to base camp right now. I've arranged for a helicopter that'll pick you up in base camp, and it'll fly you to Kathmandu. There's not enough time for you to spend a night in a hotel or take a shower or anything, but an evening flight will take you from Dubai to Seattle to Anchorage, and then you'll have about 3 days to climb Denali. I know it normally takes about 3 weeks, but I think you can do it. And maybe I just know well enough to not say no to her, or the competitive nature and juices in me were flowing, sure, nonetheless. But somehow, just 100 hours after standing on the summit of Mount Everest, I arrived to Alaska to attempt my final mountain, Denali. And so Denali in itself is an incredibly hard mountain to climb. It's 20,000 feet high. Alaska is known for extreme weather, and there's no support on the mountain, so you're dragging huge, heavy amounts of weight. I'm dragging a sled and a huge full backpack here, and my old friend Tucker Cunningham, who was a friend of mine who I grew up with in Portland, met me to be my climbing partner on the last mountain. So it was great to see him, and he was at least a little bit more energized than I was, having just flown across the world, and I've been going 130 some days at this point. I'm pretty worked. So we get up about halfway on Denali. We have 24 hours left to try to get to the top to set this second world record, which is the record for the 7 summits, not the Explorers Grand Slam. But I was 2 months ahead of the Explorers Grand Slam at this point. And we get up, and all of a sudden, we're putting our tent up, and then this is what the weather turns to. That's Tucker. I was filming, but my thoughts exactly. Pretty well sums it up right there. And so we say, okay, we got to go to bed and wake up in the morning. Like, we've got this one shot to get to the summit. Maybe the winds will die down. Alaska historically is known for these storms coming in and lasting not just a day, but usually a week or 10 days. And so we said, well, maybe we'll get lucky this time. Let's go to sleep, wake up in the morning and see what the weather's doing. Maybe we'll have one, kind of Hail Mary pass to go. So this next video is me filming myself inside of my tent the next morning. The audio is not great, but it's subtitled, so bear with me.
Still blowing. I'm practically bare here. So, we'll see.
Now there's a pump-up talk if you've ever seen one, right? Like, let's go to the summit. Let's go. So, as I'm seeing, I'm thinking, okay, I'm not hearing too much wind outside. I think it's died down, whatever. And I get outside of my tent, and this is what it looks like. I think there's just snow over my tent or something. I'm not hearing this, or I've got my earplugs in, but basically the snow and wind have not died down at all. And so it's decision time. And at this point, I said, Tucker, what do you want to do? And he said, hey, I'm here for you. You tell me what you want to do. And there's a quote that I love, which is often contributed to Confucius. Although some people say Henry Ford said it, I like to think that it was Confucius long before Henry Ford, but a paraphrase of both. It's a quote goes something along the lines of, he who says he can and he who says he can't are both usually right. And so I said to Tucker, do you think we can climb for 15 minutes today? And he says, yeah, we're at least 12 hours below the summit, but sure, let's put our stuff on. I'm here for you. Let's go out in the storm and see how we go. So we put all of our stuff on. We're hiking out of camp. A guy from another camp actually unzips his tent, sticks his head outside, and he says, hey, you guys bailing off, getting down the mountain from the storm? I hear it's going to last 10 days. We're thinking about leaving too. And we're like, no, we're going for the summit. And the guy's like, get back in your tent. No one's climbing today. And sure enough, we were the only people that even tried to move anywhere on the mountain this entire day. 15 minutes goes by and we check in. I said, how are your hands? How are your feet? How are you feeling? He says, yeah, I'm still pretty good. How are you? I'm like, I'm exhausted, obviously, but I can keep going. Let's go another 15. 15 turns to 30, another 30 turns to an hour. You see where this is going. About 3 hours in the day, this happens, which is that my pants that I've been now wearing for about 139 days straight, these Gore-Tex pants, the zippers completely get blown off of them, and now my leg is exposed to about 50, 60 mile per hour winds, minus 60-degree wind chill-ish. And so we're on the side of this mountain, trying to duct tape my pant leg up, and my watch, which I haven't taken off in 4 days, the watch strap breaks and falls on the ground. And so literally the wheels are just falling off the bus, my equipment's breaking. I don't know what's going on, but I'm like, we gotta keep going. This is our one shot. I don't even know if I have another attempt in me. And we keep going, hour by hour, hour by hour. And after 12 hours after leaving and in a huge storm on Denali, we reach this moment, which is my finish line, the summit of Denali. And that's me in yellow there, taking the last few steps after 139 days. I think his line after that was something like, and he's modest too, ladies. But I'm a little bit delirious, as you can tell. I'm trying to express my elation in some way, but you can see this look in my eye. It's mostly just pure and utter exhaustion, complete fatigue after all of this, but a moment that I will absolutely, cherish for the rest of my life. It's just a special moment to celebrate not just my hard work, but the hard work of so many other people that went into this. Jenna supporting this with every ounce of her being throughout this entire 2-year process at this point, and really reaching that moment was a special thing for me personally. But really this project, like I said before, and to kind of bring this back in this room a little bit, was so much more than just me going out into the world and trying to pat myself on the back for setting 2 world records. The media arc of all of this was exciting, 400, 500 million earned media impressions at this point around the story, and this was covered widely. But the reason that was mostly important to me was it gave us a vehicle to speak at schools, to talk to kids about setting goals, and it's really been amazing to see this grow, honestly, beyond my wildest dreams, from just an idea that Jenna and I had in our apartment in Portland, and grow into this global feat, which was somehow successful. I still kind of can't believe that we actually pulled it off, but it has allowed us this opportunity to speak and share this story with you and in many different of these forums. And one of my favorite things that we did with the kids that was a great part of this project, Jenna actually came up with it while I was climbing Everest, and it has lived on now in our nonprofit work, is asking kids this question, which is, what is your Everest? Asking these gymnasium room full of kids, and they all raise their hand because they're so excited. I love kids because they love to participate. It's a little harder with adults sometimes. But they raise their hands and they say amazing things, and that was not just in person, but actually while I was climbing Everest, you saw that I was Snapchatting, but they were sending us videos, and it was a 2-way dialogue while I was out there that was being brought into these curriculums. And kids would say amazing things. They'd say, my Mount Everest is to be the first person in my family to graduate from college. Or my Mount Everest is to be a doctor or an engineer. Or one of my favorites was, my Mount Everest is to make sure that the snow leopards stay off the endangered species list. Just the different ways that kids would imagine asking and thinking about big goals. And so I want to close this by something it's a metaphor that's really sticks with me. And because I think, although I do a lot of work with kids, I think this is a pertinent example to everyone. It's certainly pertinent to me. And the metaphor is this. So I carry this small rock with me every single day. And it's a small rock from the summit of Mount Everest. And for me, this rock stands for that moment in the hospital when I chose to keep pushing forward. And this rock also stands for my untapped potential, because as I set new goals in my life and ultimately encounter obstacles, this rock reminds me that even Mount Everest, the biggest mountain in the world, can be broken down to its smallest parts. A bunch of small rocks stacked on top of each other, many steps leading to the summit. And everyone, maybe right now in your day-to-day life, you're just feeling overwhelmed, it's too much, or maybe here at Google, you're creating some incredible ideas or thinking about innovations, but there's people around you that saying, oh, that's not possible, that's not gonna work. Or maybe you've been badly injured in an accident at some point in your life, and you're feeling like you can't make it forward, you're not gonna be able to fully recover. You see, tragedy and other great obstacles befall all of us. I don't care who you are. And in those moments, our minds are flooded with doubt. We ask ourselves these questions like, why me? Is this even possible? Should I give up? And our mindset, of course, shifts to this negative moment, the same as me in that Thai hospital. But what I learned from that, and what we all know, is that those negative mindset, we do not have to stay there. The only question that matters when facing great obstacles is, how will you respond? You have a choice. And when you shift your mindset towards the positive, you will realize that all of us have these reservoirs of untapped potential waiting to be released by us switching that mindset. I don't think that I'm any sort of superhuman athletic freak or anything like this. I think I'm just a regular guy from Portland. But I can confidently tell you this. Achievement is not for the select few. Achievement is just simply for those who never quit. It is for those who set goals, and it is for those who put the most steps in front of the others. Achievement is for those who overcome the biggest obstacle of all, their own minds. So in closing, I would say, set a goal. Take the first steps. The chair is right in front of you. And when your steps get you there, push the chair further. When you feel like giving up, put your boots back on. Let go of fear. Remember this story. And remember this rock. And watch as your rocks stack up to the summit of your Mount Everest. Thank you all very much. Any questions? Happy to answer any questions. I really appreciate you guys being here.
First question. When it comes to the poles, like, I mean, the mountains is pretty clear, like, where you start at the bottom, you end at the top.
Yep.
How does it work for the poles?
Yeah, very good question. So I don't make these rules, obviously, but for the Explorers Grand Slam, the way that the record is measured is that you need to cross at least the last degree of latitude by your own manpower. And so I was dropped off at the 89th degree at both poles and crossed the last degree, which is 69 nautical miles.
Cool.
To,
Thanks.
Yeah.
And what is next for you? Because the chair is pretty far ahead of you right now. So what are you gonna do?
You know, I have a couple other projects that I'm working on. I still think of myself, of course, as an athlete. I'm 32 years old, and so there's a couple other big world record-breaking projects that I'm gonna have to be coy about and not quite announce here on this stage. But very soon, you know, please follow along with me, social, whatever, because I'll be announcing that very soon what those are. But also, it's been a great joy for me. Honestly, this project, in terms of the arc and the exposure of it, has grown beyond my wildest dreams, and it's been amazing to have the opportunity over the last year to share this story, you know, both in a corporate format like this, as well as with kids and the nonprofit work that I do. And so that's been a huge focus. I'm working on a book, and I know that sometimes people come here on the Google stage to promote their books. Maybe I could come back when my book is out next year. But there's a lot of things in the work. But with everything I do, you know, as even these next world record big projects for me, of course, there's a huge piece of me that loves pushing my own body. But the storytelling part of it and the ability to use that as a vehicle to motivate and inspire others will always be sort of a bedrock of what I do. Yeah, thanks.
Are you planning on trying for K2 or Annapurna?
No, great question. So a little mountaineering backstory for those of you who don't know who those two mountains are. But there are 14 8,000-meter peaks, which are the 14 tallest mountains in the world. Of course, Everest being the tallest of them, and K2 being the second tallest, and Annapurna being the most dangerous of them all. And so there's a kind of a holy grail of climbing. Only one American has ever accomplished it, to climb all 14 8,000-meter peaks. So I'd be lying to tell you if I had never thought of it. It's certainly in the back of my mind. But I'm also, I fashion myself as a mountaineer, and I love climbing mountains. But as these other projects, as you'll see as I unveil, there's some will have mountain components, but there's some that are completely outside of the mountains. So not just in the mountains is what I do. Sort of endurance sports and really finding my own personal limits in many different ways is what I'm passionate about. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate it. This has been a great pleasure for me to be here. So thank you.